thank Walter for being here today to provide this service to us, especially for those who cannot be here today. Reverend Teresa Rivka Gevurtz. Now, yes, that is my favorite wine, is a Gewürztraminer. I always refer to it as a Gevurtz. That is her last name. I love this woman. Is an interfaith minister, chaplain, and spiritual director, as well as a Reiki master. She serves as the Dean of Academics at the Chaplaincy Institute and directs their Sacred Justice Ministry Certification Program. She also serves as a spiritual companion, life cycle officiant, and public speaker through her private practice, Shelter for the Spirit. Rivka has worked for 40 years at the intersection of faith and justice, starting her interfaith work at the first residence for people with AIDS in New York City. She has subsequently worked in faith-based and/or interfaith advocacy and service organizations supporting the queer community, elders, the environment, and children. Rivka divides her time between her sanctuary home in Gresham, Oregon, and her traveling home along the Siletz River on the central Oregon coast. She shares her life with her beloved of 32 years, a trans man, and their adult non-binary child. I wish you offer a warm welcome to Reverend Rivka.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be here. Just get this so I don't knock it over again.
Do you want a podium?
Oh, nope, that's fine. I've got one.
Can we all see her? Yeah. That was a joke.
I am short, I know. I can go tippy-toe if I need to. So I want to just take a moment to let you know who I am, beyond the introduction. The new moon has been a central journey for me. As many people in you have traveled through different traditions. I also have a multi-faith sojourning. I started out as a little Catholic girl, ended up becoming a Protestant deacon for a time before finding my beloved and choosing Judaism as my faith home. Through that journey, what came alive for me is a connection with the divine feminine. And nothing exemplifies that the same way that the new moon does. Let me just take a second here because my screen went dark prematurely. Go back. Okay, there we go. So, the new moon tonight is actually a super new moon, which means it's the closest to the earth it can be in our cycle right now. Very potent, very powerful. We instinctively know that there are unseen powers that flow with that dance between earth and moon. The ways that the tides move, the ways that women's bodies respond, the ways that energy shifts in the universe. We're going to talk a little bit about what new moons mean spiritually, but also how it can be a resource for us to build our resilience in these very challenging times that we're living in right now. New moons are all about new beginnings. They're about our personal journey. It's a time when people set goals and dream dreams. It's a special time for prayer, for connecting with all that is, for growing our connections, not only with the planet and our own bodies, but with each other, with community. There are many traditions that honor the new moon. My personal way of doing that is through the Jewish tradition of Rosh Chodesh. And Rabbi Jill Hammer, who is an amazing feminist theologian, has pointed out that the word for moon or month, Chodesh, also has the connotation of renewal. And so within Jewish tradition, the idea that the cycles of the moon are reflections and metaphors for the ways that life is renewed, that our lives renew. The new moon specifically has been a time of celebration for female-bodied people and others who identify as women. It's a time where tradition tells us that as the men were panicking on the Exodus while Moses was off contemplating with the divine on Mount Sinai, the men were like, okay, we've got to build a golden calf. And the women refused to give over their jewelry for something that would take them into fear instead of into hope. The other beautiful association with New Moon for women is that women were the artisan slaves. Men were out, doing the bricks and the pyramids and all of that, but the women were the tapestry makers and the artisans. And so they brought their gifts in the creation of the Mishkan, which was that traveling tent that became the dwelling place for the divine among the Israelites as they wandered in the desert. It became the home of the Shekinah, the feminine indwelling presence of the divine. There's also a midrash in Talmud that talks about how when the divine first created all that is, and created the two first lights, the sun and the moon, they started out as equals. But the moon asked the divine, so how is it going to work that two powers can be of the same level of order? And rather than directly answering her question, the divine instructed her to diminish herself. That's been a metaphor for women within spiritual traditions since the rise of patriarchy. But the thing is that our connection to the moon goes far further back. It goes into the ages of 30-some thousand years before the patriarchy, when our association with the divine was a feminine association with the divine. It was the goddess cultures who brought it forward, and we still see glimpses of that in the Hebrew scriptures. When we see Sarah and Abraham on their wanderings, and there are a couple of instances where they go to a new land, once it's to Egypt, once somewhere else, and Abraham says, don't tell them you're my wife, tell them you're my sister, and because you're so beautiful, they're going to kill me if we go there. And instead, she ends up supposedly marrying the king. This is a cover of what had been the sacred marriage ceremony in divine feminine cultures, that to replenish the earth, to be in touch with the tides, to be in touch with fertility, required a priestess to engage in intimacy with the king for the flourishment of all peoples within their realm. We see it continue in the stories about how Rachel stole her father's idols and took them with her into the land that she and Leah and Jacob were returning to Jacob's homeland. So this connection with creative, generative, energetic, divine relationship with an intimate God, not just an external, transcendent God, is part of that relationship that we continue to have with the moon. Rabbi Leah Novick, who has been teaching about the divine feminine for about 40 years now, points out that the moon, like the Shekinah, is associated with prophecy. And so it's thought that at the new moon, we're most in touch with our intuition. We're most in touch with foreseeing what is ahead for us individually and collectively. So how do we tap into this source of wisdom and prophecy, that indwelling presence of the divine? We're coming on the conclusion of the first 100 days of a regime where we have seen the fabric of our democracy, the social safety net, shredded. We're seeing the guardrails of our imperfect union being dismantled. And we're seeing an almost gleeful subjugation of refugees, women, and trans folk. Writer and systems thinker Margaret Wheatley asks the question, what if all of this destructiveness isn't about power, but about panic? An instinctive reaction that that old world is fading away. I pointed out to some of my spiritual direction clients that I don't think it's a coincidence that our greatest spiritual masters and sages lived in times such as these. Like the cycles of the moon, the cycles of history, the cycles around the sun, we cycle as peoples, as cultures, in ways of being, whether that's a culture or a mindset or a paradigm. So it begs the question, what does this moment ask of us? The largest challenge that we have in a climate crisis world that is in its late stage capitalism is that we've lost our connection with the cycles of the moon and the cycles of the earth. We've been conditioned to ignore those unseen powers, those forces of the cosmos that we are actually a part of in the ever-grasping nature of our dominant culture. Only light, progress, consumption are considered good. We've made darkness, whether that's the color of one's skin, the fullness of the earth, or the lifeblood of women, something evil. But the moon reminds us that not everything dark is evil, and not everything light is good. The pull of the dark moon, the new moon, is that whisper of possibility and the call of the ancestors. It draws us into relationships not only with our bodies, but with the planet. And it reminds us that there are unseen forces that we can tap into to build our resilience. So, how do we live into that reality? How do we draw down the moon? Psychologist Kelly McGonigal points out that helping others increases the chemistry of hope and courage and dampens fear and despair. When we come together, just like we are here today, and just like the moon and the sea when they're dancing with the tides, we generate a life-giving power. We build our resilience when we make meaning of our moments. Dan Buttner, who's the author of The Blue Zones, points out that one of the factors that leads to the longevity, or at least supports the longevity of ancient Okinawans, is that they are committed to an understanding of ikigai, which is an understanding of what's their meaning of life, what is the meaning of their work in this world, the meaning of who they are. How can we make a difference? The power of the moon invites us to know our own strengths. One of the first things that drew me into new moon observance was Anita Diamant's book, The Red Tint. And in that book, she exemplifies the ingathering of women during the new moon as a time for self-compassion, honoring the ebbs and the flows of our internal tides and learning to rest and nurture ourselves. As the feminist poet Audre Lorde teaches, rest is a revolutionary act. One of the things that this invites us is to examine what is meaningful how can we know rest? Just as the ancients knew, like the moon herself, we can't shine all the time. We have to go within. We have to be silent. We have to be present. And just like the ancients drew strength from the great mystery that was the moon and continues to be, we can draw a new strength. The current authoritarianism thrives on our isolation from one another. The new moon is a time for coming together, for strengthening our connections to one another. The powers that be are trying to cultivate despair. But the new moon instead invites us to dream of what is possible. The oligarchs want to sow division between all of the peoples of this country and planet. But the new moon reminds us that we are part of a sacred unity, that we are each earth, water, air, and fire, and that together we are made of stardust and spirit. I want to invite you into a short meditation. And this meditation is sort of part one of our ritual that we'll come back to after the break. So, get comfortable in your seats. Take a couple of deep, gentle breaths. Allow your body to rest and your feet to root in Mother Earth. Now imagine yourself in a garden under a luminous dark of the moon. The air is fresh with the scent of spring. As you wander through the garden, you realize that the flowers are glowing with an internal light that radiates peacefulness and sacredness. Allow your eye to come to rest on one particular flower. It's filled with seeds which seem to call to you. This flower is not like any other because it seems to hold a magic that speaks directly to your innermost dreams. You instinctively know that this flower is welcoming you to shake a seed from its center, which falls into your cupped hand. As you hold this sacred seed, you experience a sense of knowing that whatever you infuse this seed with will grow for the good of all. Prayerfully hold that seed. What hopes, dreams, visions for your world are you cultivating? After thanking the flower for sharing her seed, find a place in the garden where you can bend down and plant the seed gently and lovingly. And when you are ready to leave the garden, take a few more deep breaths. Feel the earth beneath your feet. And open your eyes. The moon invites us to dream into possibility. think big, particularly in a supermoon, where we can manifest miracles. The very act of coming together in community is a source of miracle. It's a source of possibility. I leave you with this blessing that wherever this day takes you, that tonight you may look for the luminous dark that is the hidden moon. You recognize her pull.